Chapter 23. Robin. Now that the storm core is past, Beetle told me, local talk tech is back online. Not any long-distance stuff. She hurried to add when my face lit up. Just house to house and the like. But that might be enough to get you somewhere that can reach the capital. Great, I said, beginning the process of unfolding my legs from under the step-stool height table. What's the plan? The plan, Beetle explained, took into account the fact that off-world ships were very likely watching the area for any sign of me. A single truck driving through the rain could be easily tracked, but not when dozens were involved. Our best bet is mass confusion, Beetle said. If I can call in enough neighbors for a hectic convoy, is that summit you'd want to be trying? Yes, I said. Absolutely. How long will it take to arrange? Standing up still hurt a little, but I was more than willing to put that aside and focus on this exciting development. Not long. We've got a list of folks to call just ready and waiting. I'll tell the elders to get started. With that, Beetle hurried out of the room. Everything turned into eager chaos, with the teenagers shoving sparklings into tubs and casting their gloves aside. To nearest folks drive fast, one told me. They ought to be here in no time. Is it safe to drive now? I asked. That storm is still going. Oh yeah, the part of storming that can kill a body is short, she said. The part that hexes the tech is longer, but now it's safe to get you out to the nearest boosted comm center. Was this a dedicated radio hub, I wondered? Or maybe that sheriff's station they'd mentioned? Nope, a restaurant, but a very important one. They've got to best food, and to best gossip, and to most powerful comm hub for a half-day's drive. A grandpa appeared at the door. Enough beaking, our honored guest has to get ready. The teenagers objected that they had been sharing important information, not talking my ear shut. Turtledillos don't have human-style ear flaps, just reptilian ear holes. This flavors their idioms. At any rate, the grandpa wasn't impressed. Come gather up your fabric, he told me, ignoring the youngsters completely. Did you bring anything else with you? Fabric? Right, my coat. Thank you. No, that's all. I could have explained that I don't normally fall out of the sky so ill-prepared, but decided against it. Instead, I asked about the bathroom facilities, bracing myself for an awkward experience. I'd seen rock-back toilets before. This one wasn't too different from the city kind, just dinky. Ever see one of those training potties for little kids? Perfect height for a 2-year-old? I got distinct training potty vibes from this bathroom, but honestly, I've had to make do with worse. I had plenty of memories of space travel on multi-species ships to keep me company while I used the facilities. Washing my hands was silly too, since the sink barely reached knee height. At least the ceiling was tall enough for me to stand. Barely. The doorway, not so much, but the bathroom itself I could stand up in. I rejoined the hustle and bustle of the living room, stepping over more than one child on my way to grab my coat. Settling it back into place, I felt just a smidge more reassured. Hard to underestimate the hugging powers of a familiar coat. It had dried mud about the elbows, but it still smelled like my favorite laundry soap. After scant minutes, I heard motors outside. The teenagers weren't kidding about the speed of the neighbors. I said my goodbyes in a rush, thanking the teenagers for the lesson as I was ushered out the back door. An uncountable number of hands waved me on. I'd always found it funny that turtledillos make the same farewell gesture as my own home culture, but this wasn't the time to think about it. A roiling, darkly dramatic rainstorm blew raindrops and the smell of wet dirt outside. I pulled the collar of my coat up around my neck, grateful for the awning the size of a 2-car garage spreading overhead. It was great on 2 counts. I only got a smattering of raindrops about my ankles, and it hid me from view of the sky. Here's hoping the smugglers don't have X-ray tech, I thought, as Beetle pointed me toward a hover truck painted a screaming purple. Apparently this was the fastest vehicle around. Or maybe the fastest driver. The passenger door swung open from the inside. "Greets!" said the turtledillo woman in the driver's seat, who wore purple-blue shell paint and a wide grin. "Quattro Moondark Water Wheel, best to meet you." I returned the greeting and folded myself into the fruit-scented passenger seat while the wind whipped past. Beetle closed the door for me and shouted instructions to Moondark. Other hovercars and trucks rumbled by under the awning, starting up a procession much larger than I'd expected. I didn't see which car Beetle got into. Moondark gunned the engine and slid into the crowd like a fish in a fast-moving stream. I told myself not to worry about how close she got to the car in front of us. These vehicles probably had excellent shock absorption. Probably. At any rate, they were just as fast and chaotic as promised. Cars and trucks edged forward and back, passing and repassing each other, swapping positions as we barreled down a muddy road in the downpour. Every time we passed a road, at least one or two peeled off. Sometimes new ones joined us. We appeared to be covering the entire web of roads with vehicles, all weaving and circling, hopefully disguising which one held the human. Moondark stayed solidly in the middle of the pack at first, then nudged her way up near the front. She talked as she drove, giving me a running commentary of all the landmarks I couldn't see past the sheeting rain. I made noises of approval and held onto the seat with what I hoped was a casual death grip. We had just passed a major road where the trio of large trucks in front of Moondark's had taken a hard right when the rain noise stopped suddenly, then it returned. I held my breath for a heartbeat. What was that? Moondark craned her long neck to see past the edge of the windshield. Look, she said. Hollow spot in terrain. What? I looked. She was right. There was a moving patch of air where no raindrops fell. Instead, they hit something large and invisible, up in the sky, and sluiced off the sides. I felt immediately colder. Oh, geez, it's following them. Is that one of the invisible ships? Moondark asked with far too much enthusiasm. She gunned the motor and sped forward through the mud. We'd best put some distance between us. Yes, please, I said, twisting in my seat to watch the truck's taillights shrink into the distance. It occurred to me that the smugglers might blame me for the loss of their ship. Our hectic plan was working so far. I just hoped I hadn't gotten some innocent farmers killed. But no explosions glowed to life, and there were no more signs of pursuit. Vehicles kept coming and going. After a while, the rain calmed from an unholy torrent to a friendly patter. Either the regularly scheduled storm was slated to end, or we were outrunning it. Just a few more white-knuckled minutes, and a town of sorts came into view. A little one, that's the sort. There 'tis, said Moondark, pointing at a faded red building. The Edible Flower, best eatery in 3 days' ride. Let's get you inside. We'll have to treat you to some eye-flower hash after you've contacted your people. Nothing like it. I said something polite and non-committal as I shook life back into my fingers. We pulled under a fancy awning along with several other trucks. The rest just blasted past. Moondark said they were waiting for the all-clear on the radio, which would also come from this exceptional food place. Sounds great, I said, undoing the seatbelt that didn't really fit. As long as the villains in the sky aren't listening for radio waves, we should be set. Is that Beetle? It was. She appeared from what I recognized as her own truck, with Sunrise driving, to lead a cluster of locals in escorting me from the truck to the restaurant. Moondark left her truck and followed. Nothing shot us. Nimble, Beetle declared as she shoved the doors open. Today is the most important use of your phone. My impression of the restaurant interior was red theme, flowers everywhere, the distinct smell of pancakes with berry sauce, many low tables, and a handful of surprised turtledillos staring at us. The one behind the counter fixed me with a speculative look and nodded. Right this way, he said. You lot have a seat, and tell me the story in a moment. Several polite hands at my back urged me forward. I didn't argue. With my head still full of invisible spaceships, I hurried after the proprietor's speed walk that managed to look dignified somehow. Must have been the posture. He had clearly seen weirder things, which made me wonder what. Through 2 sets of doors and a privacy screen, I beheld the much-touted comm station. It was more than a little baffling at a glance. All I understood about the room were the beanbag chairs and the blank video screen on one wall. Everything else was a mess of buttons and thingamabobs and doohickeys, with something that looked like a digital papyrus scroll. Maybe it was a phone book. Thankfully, Nimble was ready to do the dialing for me. He didn't even ask questions other than the phone code. I told him the code for my workplace, and that was enough to get things going. The tech made a rainbow of quiet sounds while it spun into action. Turn this all the way when you finish, Nimble muttered while it connected. I nodded, and he withdrew. Whether to wait outside the door or go demand gossip, I couldn't say. A human face appeared on the screen, Jasmeet the receptionist. Hey, he said as he recognized me. Where have you been? Kidnapped, I replied, by the same off-world smugglers who brought in all the animals. I have some crucial testimony to give. Who can you connect me to? Thus began a chaotic few minutes of Jasmeet calling on other lines and yelling at people in the next room to get in here now. Dang it, this is important. Between all the wrangling, he got the rough idea of what had happened. I told him about Zephyr and Dragon still out there in another escape pod, and about the baddies who could pop up at any moment to rain lasers or paralysis rays on us all. Jasmeet told me in turn that the ship in the forest was indeed visible now, though debate raged over whether the official off-worlders, US, were working with the illegal ones. Massively irritating that, but not as bad as the next bit of intel, courtesy of somebody official on Jasmeet's phone. Wait, hang on, Jasmeet said, switching channels. The screen swirled in a please wait pattern until he returned. Okay, yeah, the big meeting is tomorrow. They could decide to end the alliance over this. It didn't bear thinking about. We would be sent home in disgrace that would follow us for the rest of our lives and beyond, assuming, in my case, that I didn't get zapped first. What will it take to convince them it wasn't us? I asked in desperation. I can show them where the smuggler's base is. It's hidden in the footprint of the moon. Tell the police to ransack the place. Jasmeet winced. That's one of the private property landmarks, isn't it? I swore. They've got to get over these property laws. Surely there's an override for emergencies. How much time do we have? Not much, he said. It's first thing in the morning, and direct proof is the only thing that will sway them. Like what, a hog-tied alien ready to confess? Yeah, that might do it. By tomorrow morning. Yep. Fine, I'll see what I can do. Wait. The knob made a click when I turned it, and the screen went black. I took a deep breath before pushing out into the main room, where I hoped the locals were still interested in helping me. Chapter 24. Zephyr. It was wonderful to speak with someone who knew my language, however imperfectly. This bizarre creature crouching on a single leg was clearly new to it, but I wasn't about to complain. I tried to minimize my staring at her. This was easier than I would have thought, since there were more than enough other strange sights everywhere I looked. The gorilla lounging beside me was odd enough, but nothing compared to the creature made of many tails and a hat. Insectile aliens I had seen before, and humans were commonplace. But the others were bizarre, and so was the architecture, honestly. All dim light and glowing fountains. I tried not to be too distracted from the conversation. I told this Roka my story over the pattering of the fountains, doing my best to speak slowly and use simple words. The one-armed alien was a good listener. In return, she told me that the tentacle person would be supplying a safe place to hide. Some authority figures were on the way with the ability to see a person's thoughts, and they would sort out everything. That sounded wonderful. These people were so kind. The human even came up with a ration bar that wouldn't make me ill when I mentioned how long it had been since I'd eaten. The bar was chewy and vile. I didn't complain. When I was ushered toward the car I'd come in, I went eagerly, especially since Roka, the translator, was coming with me while Dragon rode in the tentacle man's car. The human went to translate for Dragon, and we were off. I spent the drive talking with Roka. She was pleasant to speak with, curious about my world, I happily shared. The friendly bug man drove us out of the dark, colorful place and into the imitation sunlight, across a significant portion of Spacetown, through what I assume were back roads, and up to a structure that actually held cars. It disappeared into the ceiling, disguising its true height. I had never encountered a parking location with more than one level, so when we approached the entrance, I assumed that the vehicles would be contained to the bottom. But no, the builders had followed the rumored human custom of making structures that climbed toward the sky instead of keeping safely on or under the ground. I'd never seen one in person before. It made me shrink back as we approached, but I told myself to be brave. A blockade stood at the entrance. That is a warning of creating things, Roka told me, fumbling for the word. Making? Building? Construction? I guessed. Yes, that. It says not to enter. But the tentacle man was already out of his car, unlocking the gate and swinging it wide. Roka explained that he had permissions beyond that of most citizens. While he waved us through, followed in his own car, and locked the gate behind us. Roka did her best to explain how policing worked here. I understood most of it, I think. With the gate secured, the tentacled police officer led the way into the strangest structure I have ever encountered. It was empty, all seamless gray floors with only a few construction-type machines silent at the far end, and many lines drawn on the ground. Wide sections of window stretched across each wall, though with no glass that I could see. Before I could truly take in the sight, our vehicle approached a ramp and started up it. Vehicles should not drive at that angle, or speed, or duration. I was starting to feel ill by the time we leveled out again. I breathed deeply. This was the next level, or the one after that, where we would switch vehicles for safety reasons. I knew that much of the plan. This level was empty as well, with only a large van parked at the far end. I focused on breathing and settling my innards as we approached. A red-brown tentacle person wriggled out of the van, wearing the same uniform as the first one, though it was slightly bigger in size. The human that stepped from a different door looked downright ordinary by comparison. The bug man parked in a corner between a wall and a window, muttering to himself, with the other car right behind us. Everyone got out. We were all quiet except for the blue-gray tentacle man, who greeted his comrades with quiet cheer. I didn't ask Roka what they said. She would tell me what I needed to know. The two of us came to stand next to Dragon and the bug man, while the human pulled her bag from the car and brought up the rear. Jacinta will leave for her job from here, Roka told me. She is an important repair person and has transportation built into that pack. I will stay with you to translate. I was extremely grateful. Roka told me firmly that it was her duty, or near enough to it. She'd already given her own people a clear message that she would be gone on official business until the overseers arrived. I wondered how her people had handled the news. The blue tentacle man stepped forward to introduce his colleagues, who greeted us with polite friendliness that Roka translated for me. The human in particular, Travis, so glad to meet you, struck me as utterly trustworthy, and I was put just a touch more at ease by the thought that this tall person would be showing me to somewhere safe. It was just as I was thinking that, and the introductions were moving on to Dragon, whose human translator was still delayed by fidgeting with her pack, that I heard quiet clicks, and a faint zapping sound that caused panic chemicals to flood my brain. Paralysis guns. I whirled to see Travis smiling at the empty air while people started to drop around me. Our friend, the blue tentacle man, was first, his vest buzzing visibly from the shot. "You mud egg!" I yelled, launching myself at Travis. "We trusted you!" I rammed my armored head into his unarmored groin, clawing and kicking as he went down. The vehicle must have blocked me from view of the invisible attackers. Even with my manicured claw tips, I did damage before my muscles locked in place. Raging at the invisible bonds, I fell stiffly to the floor beside the wounded traitor and glared my hatred at him. It was all I could do. Though all sounds were quiet under the heartbeat in my ears, I was distinctly aware of more shouting and motion than a peaceful capture called for. Someone was escaping. I wished them luck with every fiber of my being.